Hi, and thanks for watching this instructional video for CSCI 1300. In this video, we will cover the idea of using Sentinel values when processing input inside of a loop. This can be found within your textbook in chapters 4.5 under 4.5.1, which covers Sentinel values. A Sentinel value is much like a terminating condition in that what it allows us to do is it allows us to gather input in a sequence over and over again until we reach some value within the sequence that terminates the input sequence. So for instance, say we wanted to input a number of salaries into our program, which we have here in our main, and we want to eventually stop that process at some point. We can have a value that is not going to be true, or something that we know we're not looking for specifically as data to be processed, and we can use that as our Sentinel value. In this particular case, we're using a negative number, which would not be a correct salary. So when salary is -1, our process should terminate, but as long as -1 has not been entered into the variable salary, we can continuously add the salary value to another variable called sum and continue the process. Every time that we continue the process, notice that salary has not reached -1, so we overwrite salary with a new value and continue this process until -1 resides within salary on a given loop when we are running our code. If salary ever retains the value of -1, then our while loop statement suddenly becomes true, and we would exit our loop and then do some kind of a after check. Notice that this setup for using Sentinel values is based around a while loop with a terminating condition that's checking for a Sentinel value, and an if statement within the while loop checking to see if the terminating value has occurred inside of the loop body. So what this happens is we're saying as long as we haven't reached the terminating condition, we can perform some operation. So this is almost like an edge case check to make sure that we're getting the correct input every single time. So right after we get salary on a given loop, we check to see if it's -1. If it isn't, then we're going to take the salary that's correct, it's some kind of correct input, and we're going to store it within sum, which is another variable, a double. We're also going to increase the count here so that we can keep track of the number of times we have entered a particular salary. So we're keeping track of the number of salaries that we have entered so far. And notice that this loop does not have count as its terminating condition. We're not using an incremental counter here. We're using the Sentinel value as the terminating condition. So once we actually enter a -1, once we enter the input value, or the Sentinel value, into the input, we will then stop our loop because this will become true. Our loop body will no longer be processed. And then we'll have an if and an else check based on the count that was increased within the loop. So if the count is more than 1, or if it is 1, then we can calculate an average from what was entered by the user. If count is still 0 and we enter -1 at one time, say the first loop we enter -1, we should not get any data because we have not actually entered anything into salary as a result, or into sum as a result of the salary not being correct. So let's try and run our code here and take a look at how things turn out. So say we enter the following values. Say we enter 5, then we enter 10, then 15, then 20, and then we enter -1. Notice that we go straight to the end of our loop now, and we go into the if statement because our count was larger than 0, and we get the message for the average salary based on taking the sum that we calculated and dividing it by the number of entries or salaries that were entered. Now, if we also go back and we look at what happens when we enter -1, notice that we jump directly past the while loop because we've already entered -1 into salary. So this becomes true. Our while loop is jumped over. And then we check our if statement on line 21. We notice that count is 0. So we jump to the else statement and print that there was no data. That's all for using Sentinel values for now. Thanks, and happy coding.